Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Qumulex Radio. I am Josh, joined by my co-pilot and friend, Aaron Newman, who has just remarked has all the fancy Mercury boards on his wall. Easy guy to recognize. And we have a really awesome guest today here. We have Pierre Bourgeix from ESI Convergent, who's a very knowledgeable individual in the industry. I'm sure many of you probably already know him, but just in case they don't, if you could just give us a quick introduction of you and ESI Convergent.
Sure. So great to meet you guys, and this is going to be fun. So my name is Pierre Bourgeix, CEO, founder of ESI Convergent. Been around the security industry for 35 years, started out at the RAND Corporation, State Department of Security Services, worked in many types of technologies from SATCOM, NAVCOM systems, delivery of packets, packet data to the entry into the physical controls world in the early 2000s. After 9/11, I worked with the government on forward-based assessments and basically lived around the perimeter into the back office, and then cybersecurity and IT security. So every form of security technology. Started ESI Convergent after we sold a company called Secure State, which was a cybersecurity and physical security assessment company out of Ohio. And basically, ESI Convergent has two major pillars, one of which is end user consulting to enterprise large organizations. I mean, we work with the biggest and the baddest companies in the world. And we work with manufacturers. So we work on technology roadmap for the end user and technology direction for the manufacturers. We work with virtually every manufacturer you can think of over the years. We do performance testing. We do basically, if you look at specifications, performance specifications, we evaluate technology. We evaluate technology for clients as well as evaluate technology for the manufacturer, and then help them with the roadmap to enter into the market in the right way. Have the ability to speak to consultants as we are consultants, and work with the consultant community, the end user community, the manufacturing community. Frankly, we cross over virtually every area. So pretty crazy stuff. We have offices in Tel Aviv, Zagreb, Croatia. We're all over the country. Our headquarters is in Charlotte now. It used to be in Cleveland. I decided to move there because nobody want to live here anymore. So I live here, so I commute back and forth from our corporate headquarters, and we built out a lab there. We're doing some lab testing, but we're also really partnered with a lot of labs. Like, we're starting to talk to Z-Beta. We talk with Jacobs. Jacobs is a close client of ours and a partner. So we're involved in projects all over the world, from UN projects, NATO projects, all the way to projects for petrochemicals, for energy companies, financial companies, all of the above. So there you go. It's as short, as sweet as I could get.
Wow, that is quite a resume. That is very impressive. And I'd just like to note that, me, you, Chad, we're holding down the fort. We're still in Ohio. Although Charlotte's an awesome place. I don't blame anybody for wanting to live there. What a cool town. So something that I wanted to ask you, I mean, I think it's really important that you have both this physical electronic security knowledge as well as the cybersecurity. And, I am curious, how would you rate our industry in terms of the products that we offer and how everything is structured and the architecture of the different products? I mean, when you compare us to many of the IT products and services that are out there, how do you rate the security industry? I mean, are we doing well from a cybersecurity standpoint, or are we lagging behind?
Better. So that's how I could pretty much approach it. 10 years ago, well, maybe a little longer, I spoke at ISC West. It was Connected. It was called Connected, and it was the first cybersecurity, conversation in the physical security space at ISC West. And I remember clearly, right? I had stares. People were looking at me and said, "Why are you here? What are you doing here?" And this is only, I mean, frankly, if you really look at it, I think it's barely nine years ago, if that's the case. So while the entire world was in effect in the digital transformation, right? And really at the end of the day, corporations and businesses had started the digital transformation 20, 25, 30 years ago. And we know it takes time to go from an analog world or we'll just say a paper world to a digital world.
Mm-hmm.
Well, from the physical perspective, physical security perspective, there were no standards to meet, right? There's no specific way to tie physical security down and say that you're liable, right? So physical security could just do whatever it wanted. It was like out there in the ether and said, look, we're going to do what we do. We're going to transform things at our pace. We really don't need to do anything. But then all of a sudden, things got connected, right? And all of a sudden, the digital domain became relevant. And yes, even though certain vice president decided to start the internet, according to him, the reality is the internet began to become more important. And with that, we had IP infrastructure and first IP camera, with access, and you have the evolution of that. We've come a long way in a short amount of time, which is fantastic. And it's because of cybersecurity, right? It's because of IT and cybersecurity that it had to transform because there was no other option, right? So the challenge, of course, is the pace to market was going to be challenged because most corporations don't believe in, well, we can do due diligence. We want to make sure it works, but we got to get to market. So we can maybe take a few shortcuts down the path and get to market, and maybe we'll figure it out when we get there. We can't do that anymore, right? Your product gets connected to a network, you become the liability, right? And so we all talk about modernization, okay? We talk about future-proof. We'll just say we started talking in this physical space on future-proofing. Well, that doesn't exist. I mean, there's no such thing as future-proofing. There's modernization, right? You have to modernize your systems to what is required. And so I think basically with the aspects of cyber, that became a challenge. And then, of course, with ISO 27001 and NIST 870, if you go from NIST 853, 171, 207, zero trust, all of which under NIST. So if you ever want to read what I just said, just go to NIST and you'll get all you can Google each one of those numbers. The reality is this: we are we are in another paradigm shift. We are the industrial revolution or the digital revolution has now landed firmly in our industry, and we are in the throes of even more changes that I think we're not even ready for with AI and everything else. So we can breach that, but let's just say we're doing what's required, and with compliance regulations part of that requirement, technology has to reach that threshold.
Yeah. This wasn't something we talked about in advance, but an interesting question comes to mind. We've been a little slower to adopt the cloud in our industry, in my view. And there are many various reasons for that. But now we are starting to see a lot more movement with cloud native solutions like ours, and a lot of even more traditional solutions, at least being cloud connected. So there's a lot of little differences and intricacies as far as what cloud means. But in general, I think we're moving along, but boy, we are nowhere near what a lot of other industries are experiencing. Do you think that AI is going to be a motivator to increase cloud adoption faster? Will that be a component of that?
No doubt. Absolutely. I think that we don't have a choice, because if you think about, let's just talk about outcomes, right? What is the goal of solving problems? It's reaching an outcome. So I have to start, instead of traditionally layered defense, right, using technology as part of the apron of security, right? And I layer technology to get to an outcome. So I may buy cameras and access control as part of a process to get to an outcome. Today, with AI, you have an outcome first. So the specification even changes to a certain degree. It's about the outcome and then what ingestion tools you need to solve that outcome, that specific scenario. So with that in mind, right, you could use initial, and with part of this process, you can use existing technology if it's digitized and it's appropriate. So you don't really have to buy everything new. And with cloud, if you use cloud, you're more nimble in the ability to use technology. So as long as you're positioned to, and really what it boils down to is positioned to actually communicate, right, from data at rest to data in transit to finally cloud, then you're in good shape. And that's modernized systems, right? So as long as you're like in, around the bullseye, cloud can be very helpful, right? It can get you to the bullseye quicker and can scale much faster. So
Right.
that's the other part, right? So, in the regulated markets, of course, cloud has been a no-no for many years, but now because of one-way traffic, I can say, look, we can structure it in a secure way where we don't have a two-way flow of traffic. We can create and make sure that when you're getting the information you need, we don't have to have that communication path. And it's one way to the vendor, and the vendor ends up dealing with the data and the information. And so transacting is easier, right? Everyone gets what they need quickly and securely.
No, I love that. So another thing that is been a topic for a number of years now in the industry has been managed services. So you have experience with IT as well as security. As you know, the IT world, I feel like cloud came first. That enabled all the organizations to kind of change how they service their customers, and MSP came from that. I think sometimes we get the cart before the horse a little bit in the way we approach it here, but in general, that has been a net positive, I feel, for both the end customer and for the MSP providers. And I think it's been a really good ecosystem, and I'd love to see that happen in our industry as well. My question is, do you think now, AI is a great topic to throw into this with cloud, with AI? Do you see our industry moving that direction and looking much more like the MSPs and IT look, or do you think that we're always going to be just a little too different to look that way?
No, we're absolutely going to be multi-purposed. So I'm going to give you kind of the bigger picture, right? So we are a pillar of NVIDIA, ESI. So we are one of the consulting pillars. We work with all of their ISVs, right? And we help them position their in effect specifications, their specific models to ensure that they understand how to position it in the industry, in the security industry. So they're doubling down. So NVIDIA, with the power they have, they're doubling down on that. Intel has on the platform side, but I think NVIDIA is going to really, with GPU capability, and I think there's other obviously chipsets and based on that, there's other companies that are nipping. ADM could be another one that could be bringing more product or more silicon to the marketplace. But at the end of the day, that's the 100-pound gorilla is NVIDIA, and they're pushing that. So I think I'm going to kind of give you an example, right? So think about an hourglass, right? Think about an hourglass. The bottom of the hourglass is security. The top of the hourglass is risk. Okay. The middle of the hourglass is the highest level of security and the lowest level of risk. That's your choke point, right?
Okay.
And so at the bottom of the hourglass, you have nothing but security, or not just security, but technology. Sorry, all technology. So from servers to infrastructure, it doesn't matter if it's affecting the business environment. It's going to land basically in that security layer, right? It's going to be at the bottom of that layer. Below that is IT, OT, physical security, IoT, everything, and that's within that construct. So what's one thing that screws up everything? Humans, right? The minute a human touches anything, it creates a threat and vulnerability. We're the challenge, right? Because technology doesn't care if it's a human or not. It's just going to do what you tell it to do and do it well consistently, right? And then the algorithms format after that. So what the challenge is for 30 years in the security industry, specifically in the IT and cybersecurity industry, the way we solve things when something happened was we patched it, first of all, we found it, we defined it, we mitigated it, we put it in a DMZ to make sure that it's protected, quarantine, excuse me, and then we remediate it, right, and solve the problem. But unfortunately, that's a very tactical approach. So penetration testing, vulnerability assessments, all of those things, and finding the true challenge of what we do next. And those things kept on going. It's a cycle, right? The challenge is that we never tied the threat and vulnerability to the business risk. And so the perfection of where we're going today is we are tying threat and vulnerability to business risk. And that changes the whole equation. So now we're moving towards a risk-based model in terms of how to deal with technology. We're not solving problems just to patch them. We're solving problems to solve the business's issues and liability issues. So now there's value, and that's crossing over all the domains. We're now talking to each one of those areas within the organization to describe what the problem is and are they solving it together rather than solving it in silos. So this is governance, policy, procedure. So it is truly a people, process, and technology process itself. So I think what it boils down to is that with that in mind, right, while we understand now the challenges, we then can get to a more business-like process to solve the problems. And with that in mind, technology in the security industry is also multi-purpose. It has to solve a multitude of problems, not just security problems. And I think that's where AI comes in. That's where you're seeing technologies such as cameras and access control, identity management being used in business processes. The creation of biometric cards, the Sentry card, the these and this and that. All of a sudden now we see that technology is no longer one-dimensional for security. So I think that train has left the station. And if you're not on it, you're behind it. So that means your legacy if you don't modernize towards that goal.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And that brings up a really interesting question I have here. I mean, one of the things I was going to ask you about in this whole discussion about AI, I want to add a new twist to this. I wonder, just as a human being reading the news every day, regardless of the fact that I've been in IT since the 90s and all of this, I mean, sometimes I just look at the sheer number of cyber attacks that we experience. And we have been trying to deal with this problem now for over a decade, not just security, just all across the board. And it just seems like they always find another way. And I was listening to one of the many various podcasts that I listened to. I hate to admit it might have been Rogan or, but I love to get a varied diet, and had an expert on that was talking about AI, and it was going to present all this new risk. We're already struggling enough, to deal with cyber. And then my thought is, well, why can't we use AI to end this threat? I mean, I always wonder about cybersecurity. Is this a winnable war? But I wonder now, is AI, I mean, what's going to happen here? Because if they're using AI to attack us, yet we're using AI to defend, what does that result in?
So fundamentally, right, here's where CISA has stepped in to say, look, 0-1 layer should be reserved for all technology on the IoT OT layer, everything, right? Everything in layer 2 to 5 should be your network infrastructure and network demands on data. Everything else, completely segmentation takes place. Networks are beginning to be built that way. So from an IT perspective, we've known this for years. But CISA finally made it very clear to all organizations, especially in the regulated markets, you are to basically create a facility layer that only that layer can be basically formatted for that IoT, OT environment and industrial IoT. That changes the game a little bit, just a little bit. The other part is that there's some people, and I can't expose some of this, but there is something that's going to be brought to the attention of the industry, and maybe it's a good thing, maybe it'll work. I think it might. I've done an evaluation of it. A secured internet, right? That is completely different than what we know of, and this is something that could take place. It's definitely something that could take place in the OT environment, right? If that does take place and everything is fulfilled based upon some discussions that I've been having, it could very well change some things. But I can tell you right now, and I know this for a fact, and I'm the one posting a lot of these things on LinkedIn, And I continuously post them because and I'm not even posting all of them. I'm just posting the ones that I know are going to affect us the most. Um, but we are definitely in a cyber war now. This is a
Hmm.
full out. This is the World War III that we discussed, and people are taking this very lightly. They don't understand it, but I am going to tell you right now that we are absolutely in a war, and a war against the Axis powers and the ones that are the Allied powers. And this is just very much similar to World War II, but on a completely different digital war. And there, from an economic to population, this is happening across the board. And nation state syndicates tied to nation state, nation states are basically letting loose. I mean, North Korea, China, Russia. This is basically what is taking place. And unfortunately, I can only yell so much, but I make it very clear. I mean, there's certain things that happened last week that I can't discuss, but we if you saw a very big spike in attacks in the last week, there's a reason for it. So what I'm saying is this, is that we have to be prepared and we have to be very diligent in the way we run our practices and our businesses. Unfortunately, we are still very naive, okay? And there's nothing we can do about it because people are just the way they are. And they'll continue down that path thinking, oh, we did cybersecurity awareness training, last year. It should be every month, every week sometimes. The reality is that we just unfortunately are in a state of denial, and that denial is going to lead to some even more greater challenges for our infrastructure.
Wow. And do you think that
This is the worst year ever, by the way. This is the worst year ever.
yeah, and I'll be honest with you. I mean, I've read some reports that, this will sound political. It is not, but there was that report about the Russian collusion and interference against, or with Donald Trump or whatever it was several years ago. That report was released, and, it talked about a couple of things. It was a very interesting read, and it talked about exactly the cyber war that you're discussing. And I feel that if you watch the news, this has really only been increasing. And I also believe, of course, there's only the things that we hear about. That's not going to be everything that's going on. But we've seen the hospitals recently that were hit. We had the power plant, the oil refinery. I mean, on and on and on. If you start to add this up and think about it, it should be very plain to people that we should be worried. And I think if you were looking from a traditional military standpoint, we are probably the strongest military that's ever existed. So I don't think anybody's going to try and fly bombers over the U.S. or attack us traditionally. But if they could take our power grid down, or if they could cripple our hospitals or any number of things, I mean, we were very dependent on all this technology and could absolutely do equal, if not more damage as
Yeah.
traditional warfare.
Yeah. And so I want you to, there's an article I wrote, right? This is before the colonial breach. Okay. So you Google Pierre Bourgeix GAO report. Okay. I think there's two, one that was a full length article. The other one was a shorter article, but it really typifies exactly the problem and clearly aligns with what we're talking about. So this was written in just before the pandemic, right? Actually 18 or 19, something like that. The point is that we've known about these things. And we knew the GAO basically stated that pipeline infrastructure was very, very, it was positioned to be attacked in a way that nobody understood, because the reality is that as we connect infrastructure, right? As we connect infrastructure, we connect PLCs, we connect SCADA control systems, we connect industrial IoT, that becomes vulnerable. And
Right.
with vulnerabilities, without proper infrastructure, because you know as well as I, cybersecurity is just bad IT. And if you have good IT, you have good cybersecurity processes. With bad IT, you can't solve the cybersecurity challenge because inevitably you're SIV. And if you're, if you really think about it, right? I mean, if you're not segmented, truly segmented, not VLAN segmentation, but true segmentation, instead of a flat network, which most organizations have been in. And I don't want to go down the IT rabbit hole, but the reality is that that is the challenge. And then not backing up your data, not making sure that you have resilience in mind, not really, if you're doing business for the government, having a COOP plan, a continuity of operation plan, having a DR plan, having an IR plan, doing tabletops, looking at disaster recovery the right way. From an IT and OT and physical security perspective, you're doomed because you can't react fast enough. Things are going to happen to you because you don't even know what the possibility is.
Right.
I mean,
I was almost going to argue with you there, but I think you made my exact point. You beat it before I could ask. I feel like a lot of these things actually happen not just because of bad IT, but because of that lack of education. How many of these things do we hear about that somebody clicked on something they should not have, and if they were educated properly, or maybe they just weren't so overworked that they paid more attention to their emails, maybe they wouldn't have clicked on it. But I think the point that you're making is if you layer your network properly and you're not such a flat network in all these cases, you could minimize the damage that could result from that individual user. I hear is what you're saying, but I apologize. Aaron was jumping in there. I didn't want to.
No, you're good. I was basically what I was going to say kind of ties into exactly what you're referring to. I mean, to zoom out just a hair, where does governance come into play? Because, I'll just use a real world story, right? And I have a friend who's in threat ops, in the threat ops business. Hey, Javier. And he
a shout out for Javier.
Yeah. He texted me one night, and he, caught an alert that said our old employer was, being held with ransomware, and they had, X number of hours to pay some Bitcoin, or they're going to release all the personnel data. And then lo and behold, whatever, 12 months, 18 months later, yeah, then it's like I'm getting all these, alerts about my credit, report and experience, blowing up. And because now it's like we live in a world where you must have, like car insurance, you must have Experian or TransUnion or somebody watching your back, because otherwise, your data is just out there. There seems to be no accountability from a commercial perspective, where, if they get hacked, sure, we could all form together, have a class action lawsuit, we can sue them, but ultimately, it's like, from my perspective, I could be completely wrong, so I am a little bit naive to the topic, but when these companies get hacked, there's no slap on the wrist. I mean, there's no repercussions for not being safe up front. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, there are, to a certain degree, based on if you're PCI DSS required, you have to do a record of compliance. You have to be in compliance to the credit card companies.
Sure.
So doing like 27,000 transactions, it's a larger basis point, right? So yeah, if you're, and I don't know what the exact number is now based on version 3 or 4 that they're on now on PCI DSS, but there are certain pieces of that, but that really ties back to, public companies, larger enterprise companies, but what about middle market? Middle market has grown exponentially. You're right. In the middle market world, they don't really need to do anything. And therefore, they can kind of use the scapegoat of, I didn't know, I have no clue. And, we say buyer beware, but buyer has no clue, because guess what? The business is faceless. You're buying cloud-based products online. You have no clue who you're really, buying from. And where's that data at rest going, right? What is the transaction agent? Who's the processor? Is it a valid processor? Is it an out-of-state processor? Is it out-of-country processor? Is it a third world processor? What happens if that data ends up in the wrong place? People don't even know what a transaction means anymore. So guess what? The challenge is that we've gone far beyond the credit card, right? And think about this, right? If you think about transactions, we're far, far away from that. So you can't even understand what a transaction is, let alone what it means to our credit and what it means to our security. So if we don't know what transaction means, because what do we want? We want frictionless. security is not, I did a thing with Doug Gordon just recently, and it was funny because that's exactly what I said. I said, we want frictionless, but we live in we know that security is friction. There is no way that we can create a process of security without friction. And I think people are naive and they want freedom from everything, rainbows and butterflies. They want it all. The problem is that then you have to agree to be vulnerable. And so if you agree to be vulnerable, then you agree to live with this the anvil or excuse me, the hatchet over your head. So it's up to you, right? It's up to us.
No.
And I think that's the challenge, right? Because really, like Pierre said once to me, and we talked about this. He said, "Pierre, the internet is a sewer. It is an open sewer. There is nothing you can do about it until you cap the sewer and you control it. But until you control it, that's what we want. We want freedom." Okay. In Saudi Arabia, they have a capped sewer. They have their root servers are completely buried, a barrier to the public, to the public domain, to the outside world, excuse me. Abu Dhabi, Dubai, all of which are closed to the world. Their root servers are in the United States. Root servers are wide open.
Right.
Anything traffic. Your responsibility is you have the responsibility of protecting your own domain.
Do you think that is because you have, and I'm going to put a link to your webpage in the description of this video. I mean, really impressed with your body of work and all that you've been involved with, and you've done a lot internationally, of course. So, I know you've done some work with the Saudis, and you had several other things that you listed. So very impressed with that, and all very curious with that perspective, because a lot of people in America barely know anything outside their own state, let alone another country. When you say, when we go back to some of the improperly layering of networks and some of the things that we aren't doing, you said we several times. Does we count globally? Are you thinking just us, the United States, just Western nations? I mean, how do you think that we compare to the rest of the world in this regard?
I think that so it's actually a great question, right? So there are certain parts of the world that freedom is not as important. Security is. So with that in mind, we are kind of in a really interesting place, because we may have Cyber Command could, like Maria Sumnick, who created Cyber Command for New York City, right? Who's on our OT and IoT team. She would say to you that, look, even with me creating Cyber Command, they dismantled it and separated it to have it, instead of, basically your hub and spoke, and you're basically an approach that controlled everything, to having it to every domain being in control of their Cyber Command, right? So you have 10 Cyber Commands being built for fire, police, etc. Wrong way to do it, because that eliminates the ability to create, I say triangulation on target, converged approach to analysis and review. You can't define a threat as easily, typically, and you do and there's tons of redundancy. So, guess what? Because they wanted control of themselves, there was no authorized body that said, no, that's not the right way to do it. This is the way she did it, was the right way. So, we have a lot of freedoms in the United States to do the wrong thing and also do the right thing. So I hate to tell you, but this country has a strong posture on cybersecurity. But frankly, it's a little too late in some cases. And our freedoms get in the way of true security. So not a bad thing. Don't get me wrong. I love our freedom and I want our freedom. But if that's the case, then we have to start looking in different ways and looking and applying different methodologies. So I want you to think about this, right? If we had a secured internet, right, and we didn't have as many cyber attacks, and we didn't have as many, the challenges in regards to segmentation, who would that affect? That would affect the biggest and baddest companies in the world and their revenue. The companies that rely on threats and issues that take place on a daily basis. So I want you to think about that, maybe maturate that in your head, and say, well, there's a reason why we may have to go this way. There's a huge industry that's tied to this world. And, I know that there's somebody listening in on at Cisco is probably want to throw some tomatoes at me. But guess what? It is what it is.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
No, and I mean,
money.
to put it in simple person like me terms, I think what you're saying really is if you are in a situation like maybe China, where they do have a lot of technology, however, really everything is kind of state down. Everything's really owned by the PRC. Everything is really controlled by the PRC. So where they may not be able to use Google there or Facebook or many things that we have and may not have as much freedom and they're heavily tracked, there is a flip side to that coin. They are probably very secure, I would think. I mean, their only threat really would be their own government, right?
Right. 100%.
So which way do you want it, right?
Well, hey, listen, you know what, from a security guy, right, who's been in security his entire life, yeah, it would be great if we could have that control. But at the end of the day, we do have to realize, right, as a republic and as a country that is, ruled by, anyway, I'm not going to get into it. But the reality is that we have to understand that freedom means something. Liberties
freedom,
means
any type of freedom, I think what it boils down to, and I think what you're saying is, does require a lot more personal responsibility from the citizens to be informed, to do those right things. And you can't have it both ways. You can't just be dumb and happy and enjoy all this freedom and then not do your part, to be informed and take care of things the right way.
Yeah, and I think security, native security as part of a process. So, we talk about, building security into technology, right? This is what the whole promise of what we want to do, right? From software infrastructure to hardware infrastructure, that we understand that let's build that. Then let's build a communication path and secure the communication path. Let's secure virtualization, right? And sorry, cloud, right? And really understand what that means. I always say that people don't understand what that means. They think somehow there's an easy button, right? Oh, the great panacea. I call it hopium, right? We all live in this world
Right.
of hopium, and it's a drug that's horrible, right? I mean, it's terrible when you're in hopium, because everything isn't real. It's all figurative and imaginary.
Right.
So when you take cloud and you realize, look, cloud is not always your answer. And but what I mean by that is security, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to understand cloud architecture. So this is what I tell people, like, understand what that means when you build the roadmap for your operation. Know what cloud architecture means. Go to NIST and look at cloud architecture. Look at 853 and look at all that fulfills cloud infrastructure, and know what data at rest and data in transit is, how you protect yourself from potential man-in-the-middle attacks, how you use and deploy technology to ensure that it doesn't become and affect your anchor, right? And understand how you transmit data back and forth from your organization. Are you, securing that process? Are you looking, if you're building out infrastructure to support it, make sure that, do you need to be federated? Do you need to be put in a position where there's more identity tied to, MFA tied to that transaction? But I think that people are, they go, well, somebody else is going to handle it for me. I'm like, nobody's handling it for you. This is the land of the free and home of the brave. And nobody's going to come rescue you unless he's an FBI agent who's looking to acquire your laptop and your server, because you are under investigation. So that's the challenge. People think that somehow there's a rescue squad. There isn't.
Yeah.
Not
The Avengers aren't real.
There's no rescue squad. It just doesn't exist. And if you want to hire us for forensics, it's going to cost you a pretty penny, because you didn't fix the things when we told you to fix it. You came after the fact and go, I need help. And I'm going, okay, yeah, now that the ship has sailed, now we got to rebuild it. And guess what?
Yeah.
All that information is in the dark web, buddy.
Yeah. Yeah. You're never going to get that back. This has been really fascinating, a little scary, but very fascinating. And I think it's an important set of topics that we should discuss, especially in our industry. I think we need to be talking about this more. I know I've already overindulged in your time a bit, but I want to ask you one last thing before we go.
Sure.
With all this body of knowledge and expertise you have, is there one big thing that no one's talking about that everyone should be?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that, yes, the age of quantum, and the age of quantum is slowly approaching. The aspects of infrastructure, right? So EMP, electromagnetic pulse. I know we talked about it in the past. These things are now concerns, okay? And the critical infrastructure has to protect themselves from these type of challenges, as well as the age of quantum, which is right around the corner. We are not going to have encryption capability once quantum arrives. We have to change our whole philosophy around quantum. Quantum compute, right? I know people are going, oh, that's years away. No, with AI, with how we are approaching technology, how we are maximizing energy efficiency, how we may move. I mean, look, if you use Diamond, Ruby on a chipset now, with the speed and using Teflon instead of, and I'm not going to say that, you know, because Intel's right now going, oh, they're itching. What are you talking about? But there is a roadmap there. And I think we have to be really cautious. We think we got the answer. It's like we had the answer about electrical cars. I mean, come on, buddy. You don't have an answer. It's a problem within a problem. So now hydrogen is being discussed, which I think is probably a better alternative. But that changes everything because, oh my God, we just spent all this money to reap. This is what I'm saying. Right around the corner is quantum. And I think that that's going to change a shitload. And with AI becoming part of the equation, because that's not going away. It's not a pet rock. It's here to stay. It's here to stay. Be prepared. It's going to change your lives. It's going to change how you do business, how you do things, how you work, how everything takes place in your world. So what you have to do is you have to realize that we are in a paradigm shift that started with the technology revolution, right? The whole internet revolution changed everything. This paradigm shift has had 3 evolutions. We're on the 3rd evolution with respect to AI. The 4th evolution, which is the 4th domain, I call it, is basically quantum. And if you're not realizing it, it's going to completely change. And that's why secured internet, using methodology that can be quantum secure. So that's what I would say is on my mind.
Well, you just blew my mind because I have not been thinking about that at all. Wow. Pierre, this was really enlightening. I'm going to now go climb under some covers and hide from the quantum. You know, I'm very, very positive on AI. I think it's going to be a great thing, honestly, for mankind. And I think it's going to be like anything. If you think cars are stupid, let's do wagons. Yeah, you might lose your job because of it. But, you know, adopting this new technology and embracing it, I think it's good for everyone. So I thought I was ahead of the curve and you just tossed quantum at me. So, okay. So we got more to think about there.
Yeah,
Pierre,
definitely.
Thank you so much for coming on, and thanks to Chad Paris out there for getting us connected.
Yeah, we love Chad. Chad's a good guy, man. Yep.
I wanted to have you on just because you're a fellow Buckeye. Turns out you're also a great guest. So,
well, you know what? If you're in town and we want to have a cigar and a glass of bourbon and talk about the challenges of the world, you're always invited.
I have a feeling I'm going to need a bourbon to have a long conversation with you. Pierre, thank you so much for joining us. Everybody else out there, thanks for watching or listening again. Just a quick reminder, if you want any more information about Qumulex, or if you'd like to see the episode that we have now, Qumulex.com. Also, make sure to follow us on YouTube and all our social channels to stay up to date with everything else. Thanks so much for Aaron. He shows up, asks 1 or 2 really smart questions every week. Really makes me look good. Thanks again to Pierre. Everybody else, we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.
Thank you, man. Yep.